Looking at our world from a theological perspective. This is the Theology Central Podcast, making theology central.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is Friday, June the 21st, 2024. It is currently 2:12 p.m. Central Time, and I am coming to you live from the Theology Central studio, located right here in Abilene, Texas. Now, I am hoping that this broadcast goes a little bit better than the last one. The last one I had, of course, my daughters. I go live. They can be in another state, another country. It could be at any time. I go live, boom, almost instantaneously, I'm getting a FaceTime call. It's like they plan it. I think they have a conspiracy. Hey, are you monitoring it? Yeah. Oh, he's going live. Call now. Let's interrupt it. I think they do it on purpose. Okay, maybe that's me just being paranoid. Okay, so we had that. And then I'm like, 10 minutes into the broadcast, 12 minutes into the broadcast, and all of a sudden I hear, wait, my food is here? How did my food arrive? So it wasn't supposed to be here for like another 20, 25 minutes. How is my food already here? Now, you'd think I would be happy that my food arrived so early, but I wasn't happy because, I was in the middle of a broadcast, so then it gets cold and I don't like, yeah. So then I had to abruptly kind of end the broadcast. It was horrible. But hopefully everything goes better for this broadcast because this is an important broadcast. It's Friday. You know what that means? We are almost at the end of another week. And remember, this week turned into the Psalm 83 week. And I've given you all kinds of assignments and things to do for Psalm 83. Hopefully you've been very busy at it. Hopefully. Not a lot of people have turned in much, but hopefully people have been busy with it. And remember how it all started. I was in my car. I had to drive to this place and this place and this place and this place. And I had to sit in parking lots waiting. Just a lot of driving and waiting. And so I'm like, you know what? It's 2024. It's the Sermons 2.0 Sermon Challenge. So let me grab my iPad and download a bunch of random sermons from the Sermons 2.0 app, and I will listen to them as I drive. Yes, see, I participate. I give you the challenge, but I participate in the challenge. And remember, I came across a sermon entitled The Coming Middle East War, and I'm like, ooh, I wonder what they're talking about. This has got to have something to do with eschatology or prophecy. So I started listening and we realized immediately that the entire title of that sermon was Psalm 83, The Coming Middle East War. And remember, it's an entire series. It's like up to 17 or 18 parts now. I think they just dropped a new episode for that series. I think they just dropped one today. I think maybe that's part 16 today or part 17 today. So they're continuing their work on it, which is great because it's more content for people to listen to on Psalm 83 as we continue to work on it. But remember, we listened to it and we were somewhat perplexed. The reason I was perplexed is how is Psalm 83 about a coming Middle East war? I don't see it in any way, shape, or form as being prophetic. In fact, it's not even classified as a prophetic psalm. It's not a messianic psalm. It's a psalm of lament. It's a lament psalm, a communal lament psalm. So I'm like, how is this being prophetic? I don't see it. And we were confused. So we've done a little bit of work on it. And you can go listen to my 2 hours of teaching. We did an outline. We talked about the author. We talked about the type of psalm that it is. We started working on it. And remember, we did another sermon review. And we found out that some believe Psalm 83 is actually connected to 2 Chronicles chapter 20. So I told everyone to do kind of a comparison and contrast between Psalm 83 and 2 Chronicles 20. Make a chart. Remember, I told you to do that. Well, I finished a little bit of work today on my own compare and contrast on Psalm 83 and 2 Chronicles 20. So there's a high probability we'll talk about it Sunday at Victory Baptist Church. I don't know how we'll do so. I need to get back to our eschatology, but the Psalm 83. But the bottom line is the week is almost over. So we've got to do some more work on Psalm 83, right? We have to. We've got to. We got to figure it all out. So I was just looking And I was just looking for random sermons on Psalm 83. And I find that when you do a search right now, Psalm 83 on the Sermons 2.0 app or the beta.sermonaudio.com website, you're going to see that long series on Psalm 83, the coming Middle East war. And then they get to like part 12 or part 13. And then they change the title to just now Psalm 83, part 13, 14, 15. I don't know why they changed the title. That was odd, but they changed the title. Usually you don't change the title in the middle of your series, right? Or you go back and change all of them. So I don't know, but they're still talking about it. So I kept looking. I'm like, okay. And then I saw all of my messages on Psalm 83. I'm like, okay, who's this weird guy? All right. Then I skipped all of those. And then I came across one and I'm like, wait, what is this? We all know Psalm 83 is clearly a prayer. It's a lament, right? And if I go to Psalm 83, remember how it begins? Some of you should have it memorized by now, right? Do not keep silent, O God. Do not hold your peace, and do not be still, O God. For behold, your enemies make a tumult. The psalmist is crying out to God. He's crying out to God. He needs God to hear. He needs God to listen. He needs God to intervene. He needs God to speak because they're in a very difficult situation because a confederacy of nations is coming against Israel. So this is a psalm of lament. Now, we talked about that this is a psalm of Asaph. He was a Levite in charge of the worship. So he may have composed this for the worship of Israel, for them to cry out as a community, in a sense, as a congregation of Israel, to cry out to God and lament. So I would say, who is praying? Well, Asaph is praying. Who is praying? Israel is praying. But I stumbled upon a sermon with this title, The Church's Cry for Help. And I'm like, wait, the churches? Wait, this is Israel. Do we keep Israel and the church distinct? Or do we say Israel is the church in the Old Testament? Now, which a lot of people believe. In other words, I know this is going to come as a shock. In all the years of theological studies in the history of Christianity, there's not agreement on how distinct do we keep the Israel and the church and how much do we bring them together. So who is actually praying in Psalm 83? Is it Asaph? Is it, if it's a communal lament, it's for Israel, right? Is this a national lament? Instead of calling it a communal, do we call it a national lament? Is this the prayer of the nation? Or do we call it the prayer of the church? Does it really matter? Well, you know how the reviews work. I haven't listened to it yet. So let's have a little bit of a sermon review as we try to finish our week focusing on Psalm 83. Don't forget, we're still working on the book of Proverbs. We got that to work on too. So are you ready? Here we go. I hope the volume is loud enough. This is one time I didn't immediately feel the need to go, amplify it in my software. So if it's not loud enough, well, it's too late now. Okay. We're 9 minutes almost, 8 minutes and 36 seconds into this, 37 seconds into this. There's no going back. If it's not loud enough, I don't know what I'll find someone to blame. All right. I'll open up the map and close my eyes and just point, and whatever state I end up on, that's the state I will blame. Okay. All right. Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, the churches cry for help. You can find this sermon on the Sermons 2.0 app. As I always tell you, any sermon I review, please go download it. Please stream it. Listen to it without all of my interruption, right? Listen to it. Give them the stream. Give them the download, all right? And if you like what you hear, go follow them, all right? If you're using the Sermons 2.0 app, how many people are you following? How many sermons appear in your feed tab per week? Do you keep track? I want my feed tab updating all day is what I want. I want every time I grab the Sermons 2.0 app and I hit the feed tab, I don't want to just see my messages. No, I follow me because I want to make sure that my stuff is showing up in the feed and it's showing up everywhere and it sounds okay. But please use the app and follow. Find a number of broadcasters that you follow. If you have your list of broadcasters you follow, email them to me. newsif@yahoo.com. newsif@yahoo.com. I would tell you, though, you should be following the briefing, the daily briefing by Albert Mohler, because that comes out Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So that's one you want to, because it's there every single day. That's Albert Mohler, the briefing, or the daily briefing. Okay, you want that. Then what I highly recommend is following every Bible college and every seminary and Bible Institute. If it's labeled Bible Institute, Bible College, or seminary, follow that, because that shows you what's being taught, what's being emphasized by those places of higher learning, training the next generation of pastors. That kind of lets you kind of know where Christianity is going. So you want to follow all of those. It doesn't even matter if it's got Bible College, seminary, Bible Institute in the title. I'm following them. I don't care if I agree with them, disagree with them. I follow them. So those are some things to start with. All right. But are you ready? Here we go. I'm excited. See, you hear that? I'm rubbing my hands together. It's like, ha ha. Now, am I rubbing my hands together because, ooh, I can't wait? Or am I rubbing my hands together like, ha 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 ha. This is going to be so bad. I'm going to make everyone take a trip to the liquor store before this is over. Okay. Now, I never know. So I'm always like, I'm almost like cautiously optimistic. Oh, this is going to be good. We're going to learn something. And then sometimes by the end, I'm like, oh no, it's like, I never know. I always hope for the best. Here we go.
We shall again read God's word in the book of Psalms and Psalm 83. Book of Psalms and Psalm 83.
Now come on. It's time to be honest, class. It's time to be honest. If I play a sermon and the speaker has a strong British accent, versus I play a sermon for someone who has a strong Southern accent from the deep South, Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, Louisiana. I'm just naming places. If they're not considered the deep South, don't blame me. I went to a public school. Okay. All right. Texas. I don't like to be referred to as Texas as the South because we are our own country. We don't need anybody else. Okay. All right. But you know what I'm talking. A strong Southern accent. Now, come on. Be honest with you. Be honest with yourself. Which one do you perceive to be more educated, more academically sound? Which one comes across as smarter? Look, the British accent just comes across the European, well, not the entire European, but a British accent. I think that's fair to say. We could go to other accents in Europe, but okay, you get the idea. I think we just immediately, maybe at least from the American ear, they just sound more educated, more sophisticated, more knowledgeable. Just from the accent itself, which once again always scares me because that demonstrates that a lot of our perception of what we hear is greatly influenced by a lot of factors that have nothing to do with the actual content of the messages. A lot of people, when they would hear Dr. J. Vernon McGee with his accent, be like, this guy's an idiot. Well, he was very well educated. It's just his accent. So why do we do, and which scares me because that means maybe there's something else influencing how we perceive something. Remember, we have to set aside all of those distractions. It doesn't matter how well spoken someone is. Doesn't matter how well that they do all the right things in communicating, eye contact, not being monotone, all of those things that can be very helpful. Right? Great storytellers, they say a great pacing. They don't talk too fast. They don't talk too slow. They don't talk too loud, but they don't talk too quiet. A lot of variation in the volume. All those things that they do. They get to the point. They don't spend all the things I do wrong. Okay. All right. They do them all right, but you can get pulled in and you're actually you're just following something or agreeing with something because the way it sounds. What we have to do, at least as Christians, and what we listen to is listen to the content, not the accent, not the speaking ability, not the lack thereof. Now, but at the same time, we have to be honest. Look, I was listening to a sermon earlier, and I'm just going to be honest with you. The way the person spoke, I know I'm going to sound ungodly. I know I'm going to sound fleshly. I just kind of got irritated with it after a while. It just bothered me. And I don't know if I can clearly articulate why. I don't know if it was the way they came across. Everything about it just like, oh, okay, can I finish this? You know what? That's not godly. That's me. But I got to be honest with you. And come on, you can sit there and roll your eyes. You probably get irritated with me sometimes, right? I take too long to get to the point. I'm too repetitive. Maybe I'm too loud. Some people say I'm over dramatic. I cut myself off in mid-sentence. I do that frequently. I'll be getting ready to say this and then just jump to something else. Yeah. My accent probably shows up at times. So, yeah, but all right. So I just, as soon as I hear, oh, wait, I hear his accent, I know immediately how it can be perceived. All right, let's go.
Psalm 83, the title of this psalm, a song or psalm of Asaph. Keep not thou silence, O God. Hold not thy peace. Be not still, O God. For lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people, and consulted against thy hidden ones. They have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance.
Now let me just interrupt his reading right there. He's reading at a very good pace. Enunciation, which I don't do any of those things. I just like, okay. And then people are like, what did he just say? Okay. But please note, the title of the sermon is The Church's Cry for Help. And I would just like to point out, so you have these enemies. They hate God, right? They've taken crafty counsel against your people, right? And consulted together against your sheltered ones, in the translation I'm using, but look carefully. They have said, come, let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel, may be remembered no more. Now, I find it interesting that the title is The Church's Cry for Help, when clearly this is identified that the individuals that are being attacked is the nation of Israel. And that the Confederacy of Nations wants Israel to no longer be remembered, not the church. Now, unless you just then say, well, whenever it says nation or Israel, we just automatically call it the church. So I find that fascinating that is, look, there's a major divide in Christianity. Like, we kind of merge the church and Israel together, or we keep them distinct and separate. And I think we keep them distinct and separate from the only thing that makes sense hermeneutically, right? It says nation, it says Israel, but yet the title of this sermon is The Church's Cry for Help. Now, is he going to make it a very big, now in the sermon, let's be fair, he could make, hey, this is about Israel, but we are going to apply the lessons to the church today. Now we could argue, is that going to work? So maybe that's what he's going to do. Time will tell.
For they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee. The tabernacles of Edom and the Ishmaelites, of Moab and the Hagarenes, Gebal and Ammon and Amalek, the Philistines with the inhabitants of Tyre. Asher also is joined with them. They have hope in the children of Lot. Do unto them as unto the Midianites, as to Sisera, as to Jabin at the brook of Kishon, which perished at Ender, They became as dung for the earth. Make their nobles like Oreb and like Zeb, ye all their princes as Zebah and as Zalmunna, who said, let us take to ourselves the houses of God in possession. O my God, make them like a wheel, as a stubble before the wind, as a fire burneth a wood, as a flame setteth the mountains on fire, so persecute them with thy tempest, and make them afraid with thy storm. Fill their faces with shame, that they may seek thy name, O Lord. Let them be confounded and troubled forever, yea, let them be put to shame and perish. That men may know that thou, whose name alone is Jehovah, art the most high over all the earth. Amen. So the Lord would help us this evening. I'd like us to consider this psalm. We might title it our thoughts, The Church's Cry for Help.
Okay, so a reading of the entire chapter, and I do like this. Right here, he's articulating clearly, it seems, his thesis. Now, he's going to have to explain it, but it's the church's cry for help. Now, again, he may say, this is about Israel. This is about what happened in 2 Chronicles 20. Maybe he's going to do that. Then he may say, now, as the church in 2024, or whatever year this was preached, here's what we can learn from it. Maybe that's what he's going to do. I don't know. I always get nervous when a passage that's clearly about Israel shows up in a sermon where the church is in the title and not Israel is in the title. That's my own theological, that's because of my own theological perspective on the subject. But let's see what he does.
The church's cry for help. When we think of the church of God, his very presence on earth is a wonder. We should never lose sight of that fact. That the presence of the church on the earth is a wonder. It speaks of the grace of God. Because it takes grace to bring sinners to Christ. It's not something that happens to people naturally. It's not that there's anything wrong with the gospel. It's not that Christ is not attractive. He indeed is the fairest of 10,000 to all who are right thinking and who can see clearly. But of course the problem is that the God of this world has blinded the eyes of those who believe not, lest they turn and should be converted and healed and saved. Their thinking is warped. It's only God's grace renewing the heart and persuading and enabling people to close with Christ that enables people to come to him. And they are brought into the church, and so the church is built up. The church are a body of people who are called by grace. Let us never...
Okay, so I think what he's going to attempt to do here, it sounds like, is that the church is a body of called out people, called out by God's grace to believe. So it's just a body of people. So then you could say, well, then by that definition, Israel was then a church because it was a body of people who were called to believe. I guess you could do it that way if you want. But to me, you've got to maintain the distinction between the nation of Israel and the church. I think you have to maintain the distinction, or it just hermeneutically just stops making any sense. And again, I've told everyone, get a Matthew Henry commentary and read the Old Testament. Everything's the church, the church, the church. And you're like, no, that's the nation of Israel. That's Judah. That's the southern kingdom. That's the northern kingdom. That's this. No. So I think that's what he's going to attempt to do. Now, whenever we say the church, I know there's major arguments about this in the world of Christianity. This gets into an argument about ecclesiology. But, when we say the church, there are those who just think of the church more as an invisible body, right? A universal body made up of all people who believe, right? So it's just a universal body. If you believe you're a part of the church, right? That's just an invisible body. You don't see it. It doesn't meet. It doesn't have a doctrinal statement. It doesn't do the Lord's Supper. It doesn't do, but you're just a part of it. Now, the reason Protestants love that universal idea is because the Bible speaks of we all must be one. There's supposed to be unity. Well, since there's literally no unity in the visible church and we don't agree on literally anything, then we can say, but we accomplished the unity in this invisible body that, well, we don't really know who's a part of it. Well, people who believe, but we will argue, well, does that person really believe? Does that person really believe? So we don't really know who's in it, and it's just made up of believers. But it gives us a sense of, see, there's unity. It doesn't require any actual unity. It's just because, well, all people who believe are a part of it, then magically we accomplish the unity part, even though it doesn't really do anything because, well, the rest of us fight and argue. So there's that idea. Others believe within church Christianity that there is not the existence of an invisible body. That whenever the church refers to the body of Christ, it's referring to a local assembly, an actual, visible, physical body, right? A group of actual people. It's not some mystical thing made up of people who are saved. I mean, they're not really there yet. I mean, they're just assigned that position because they're still living here on earth. But whenever it refers to the church, it's referring to a body of called out believers who physically meet. That the church is a physical institution. Now, so some really emphasize that it must be a local congregation. That's the body of Christ, not this invisible. And so there's major, I won't say major fights over it, but there's clear lines drawn and clear differences in the history of Christianity over this. I have gone to schools who reject the invisible body. And I have gone to schools that clearly believe in the invisible body. Now, how much impact that has, you could have your own discussion about that. Let's see where he's going with it. But just please note, this is a Psalm 83, where Israel as a nation is clearly mentioned, but the sermon is beginning about the church. I find that just baffling to me. But why wouldn't you start with Israel, since that's literally what the text literally says? Again, let me read the words again. They have said, this is the confederacy of nations, the enemies, come, let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel, or Israel, if we really want to emphasize it, may be remembered no more. It clearly identifies. Let's continue.
Forget that we might give thanks if God has called you to himself. It wasn't you or anything special about you. You received mercy and being brought under the sound of the gospel and of Christ by the Spirit applying the truth to your heart. And not only is it grace to bring sinners into the church, it's grace to preserve God's people in this world, to preserve them as believers within the church. For we have great enemies, the world, the flesh, and the devil.
Now, whenever we talk about God preserving those in the church, let me ask, are we saying preserve them spiritually? Or are we saying preserve them physically? Because Christians have a weird thing about this, right? Like on one hand, God is the one who protects us. God is our rock. He's our defender. He's our shield. He preserves us. Nothing can harm us apart from God's will. And then churches want armed guards? If the church or Christians are protected by God, and God's our rock, our shield, and you don't mean that spiritually, you mean that physically, well, then why do we have armed guards? And many churches want armed guards or deacons carrying guns. Why do many Christians have a gun to protect them in their home? Why? God's going to protect you. He's your rock, your shield, deliverer. Why? So it's like one thing, we confess certain things, and I don't think we ever then is he the one protecting and preserving? And isn't it interesting? He protects and preserves until someone dies and say, well, now it was God's will for you to go. So God only protects you until God's done protecting you. So then how do you know how long God's going to protect? God will protect you until the time is for him not to protect you. So he may protect you today, Friday, June the 21st. Well, tomorrow you may be mugged, murdered, and killed because his protection runs out on June the 22nd because that's when it was appointed for you to die. But if then that's the case, then why do you worry about locking your doors? Why do you worry about protection and a gun or anything like that? I mean, those are questions I think that I always find it just, and remember, I cut myself off. I always find it interesting, just the logical inconsistency that I see in many Christians. And I'm not the only one to point it out. Remember, I've told before the news story after one of the church shootings. It was a news story about how many churches now have got armed security. It may be they hire people or they have men in the congregation carrying guns. I even talked about a sermon here in the Dallas area, about 2.5 hours from me, where the guy on the radio was bragging, hey, you come to our church and you pull out a gun, you're going to die, basically, because I got men here with guns. I mean, basically almost like saying, bring it on. It was really weird. I tried to find that program and I think the radio station pulled it. The whole thing was just bizarre. But there was a news article where it was talking about churches having armed guards. And the photograph for the news article was all these people holding up their hands. And on the screen is like, he's my refuge, my shield, my defender, an ever-present help in times of trouble, right? And they're praising God. But the photograph it's taken behind the congregation. So you can see them all, what they're singing, because the words are on the screen. They all have their hands up. And guess what's on everyone's hips? Guns. Everyone's carrying a gun. And so the author is kind of like, he didn't have to say anything. Wait, God's your protector, help and defender, but you've got armed guards. So is he or isn't he? Does he preserve or does he not preserve? Now, I'm not saying that. I don't know what this church believes about the situation. The fact, I don't even know if it's, where this church is located. They may have a completely different take. But here in the United States of America, I always find it interesting. So when he says God preserves and protects those in the church, protecting us from what? Physical harm? From what? From sin? If he's protecting us from sin, then why do Christians sin? Is he protecting us from the devil? Well, if he keeps the devil completely away from us, well, then I don't need to be sober, vigilant, and looking out for the devil because God's going to keep him away from me. So does God keep me away from sin? Does he keep sin away from me? Does he keep Satan away from me? Does he keep my flesh away from, what is God doing? I think that's a reasonable question.
We're liable to self-destruction through our own indwelling sin. And the world seeks to draw us away, as does Satan. But thanks be to God, whom he has begun a good work in, he will continue and complete until the day of Christ. The eternal security of God's people.
Now, I do believe God preserves us eternally, yes, because we're saved by an imputed righteousness. But see, it's always weird, we would self-destruct. So God keeps us from self-destruction. Well, what happens when we fall into sin? Where was God? It's really weird. On one hand, we talk about God's involvement and God's intervention and God protecting and God preserving and God doing this and God doing that. Well, but there's sin. So then do we then say, well, God decided not to protect that? I've told you in the last few weeks, the Christian Post have had so many articles about very well-known pastors who have fallen into very, very, very grievous sins, very bad sins. So now what most Christians do is just throw the pastors under the bus and say, well, there probably weren't even Christians in the first place. We just throw them out of the kingdom of God. Or maybe where is God? Those are the questions. Whenever I ask those questions, people get mad at me. You ask way too many questions, but these are questions that have to be asked. And again, now what I'm perplexed by, again, is we're listening to another sermon on Psalm 83. And it seems like we're going further and further away from Psalm 83. Now, I feel confident he's going to circle right back around and get us right into Psalm 83. But all of his opening illustration and setting up his hypotheses is all about, well, us. It's about us, okay? It's not yet about the people, Psalm 83, the people in Psalm 83 who are actually offering up the lament, which was Israel.
Is a reality of grace. Let us give thanks. Are you still pressing on faithful? It's the grace of God in you and through you, enabling you to do that. And
so if you're still pressing on in your Christian life, that's God enabling you. Now, we're right back to the God enabling you. What does God enable you to do? He only enables you to press on, or does he enable you to fully succeed? Or does God, for some reason, don't want you to fully succeed? If he's enabling you, why would he not enable you to perfection? Well, nobody can be perfect. So then God's enabling lacks the ability. It's an enabling that will not get you to perfection. Is it only like, I don't see, the enabling is always, so many times I hear these sermons, God's empowering you, God's strengthening you, God's enabling you, God's doing all of these things. But then it's like, but, you can never be perfect and you never can be sinless. Well, then there's a limit to his enabling. Why is there a limit to it? And again, if God's doing the enabling, and then if I fall, is it because I did not use the enabling? Well, why wouldn't the enabling then overcome my unwillingness to use the... Oh, it just becomes so confusing to me. It's so like, I can't follow it sometimes. But what we want here is Psalm 83. What we want is Psalm 83. That's what we want. That's what we're going to get. I'm confident, right? Are you confident? Right? You want to put some money down right now? You want to bet? Betting is open right now. Do you believe we're going to get to Psalm 83 right now? And we're going to really understand the text? Or do you believe this is going to just completely almost ignore? Psalm 83 is simply going to become a tool so that we can talk about us. What do you think? 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 I'm going to be confident, right? Maybe it's the accent. See, the accent sounds like this is going to get us to Psalm 83, right? Maybe? All right, here we go. We're going to find out.
so it's God's grace that preserves the church. The weakness of the church often, the sins which plague God's people as a body. There are real problems. It's difficult to remain faithful at times. And then there are the enemies of God. And here in this psalm, we have a prayer which is very much a cry for help in the face of the enemies of the church. It's a reminder too.
The enemies of the church. And again, it's so confusing. Did you not catch how confusing that got? God's enabling you. God's protecting you. God's preserving you. But yet the church is filled with sin. And it's hard sometimes to remain faithful. Well, wait a minute. If God's enabling, strengthening, preserving, and protecting, then why would it be difficult to accomplish anything? See, it's the double speak within Christendom that drives me crazy. But now, just please note, Psalm 83 now is going to be about the enemies of the church. Isn't this the enemies of Israel? But, okay, let's see where this is going to go.
Surely this psalm that we should know what God has done in the past. The biblical history is useful. That Old Testament church history is brought to the fore here and made and is something which is used to be an encouragement and inform this prayer. And of course we can build on that some of God's dealings with the church in post-apostolic history and think of how God has worked in the past. And that encourages us, including in dark times when we may need to cry for help. If in the days
Also, do you not find it, at least, do you not struggle with this? If God's protecting and preserving and strengthening and enabling, then why do you ever find yourself in a situation where you need to cry for help? Did your protection break down? Like, sometimes I just I don't understand. I don't understand. Okay. All right. But he's still making it about the church. But he just turned the page in his notes. Did you hear that? He turned the page in his notes. So I'm assuming he's now turning, and we're going to actually get into the text. Let's see what we can learn here.
Of Asaph, there was a consciousness of the enemies of God surrounding the church. And I cry, keep not thou silence, O God, hold not thy peace, and be not still, O God. For lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. Well, if that was true in his day, don't we feel that way in our own day? The enemies of God have certainly lifted up the head. There is a tumult. There is so much opposition to God and his Christ in our own land. Surely we make this prayer our prayer. We'll notice three things as we just briefly reflect on the psalm this evening. The church surrounded by her enemies, the church protected by God.
His entire outline is including the church. The church surrounded by its enemies, and the church protected by God. This is Israel surrounded by our enemies and Israel protected by God, because God made a specific covenant with the nation of Israel, not with the church. He made a specific covenant with Israel, and he fulfills, he has been and will ultimately fulfill every covenant promise to the nation. The promises made to the nation are not made to the church. There is a distinction.
And the church's prayer. First of all, the church surrounded by her enemies. And you'll notice the picture you have is of the Israel being encircled. There are.
Okay, now he finally mentioned Israel. He finally used the word Israel instead of using the word church. Finally. All right, that's a good thing. So maybe I see what he's going to do. Let's see. I'm going to be somewhat positive here.
There are many enemies that are mentioned from verse 4 onwards, and it's as if you can just draw a circle round Israel, and there they are. She's surrounded. And she has been threatened. There are many enemies. There are powerful enemies. And there is little Israel in the midst of them. Of course, it's not referring to the circumstances now. It was the circumstances of these days. And it reflects the way it often is with God's people, that they find themselves confronted by many enemies and are plotting together against the church. You'll notice that, how they have consulted against thy hidden ones, verse 3. They're taking crafty counsel together. They are those who are confederate, so they have conspired. You've got those who might not very naturally be friends with one another, and yet that hatred of God's people brings them together. It reminds you of how Herod and Pilate were reconciled in Jerusalem at the time of Christ's crucifixion, of how you find the Pharisees And the Sadducees had little time for one another, along with the Herodians, bound together in opposition to Christ. So when we think of people, even in our own land, plotting, we might say the downfall, making life hard, having no thought for the rights of Christ and God's people, threatening perhaps even that if we would evangelize, people are converted, who knows what may come of that. To be confronted with these challenges is nothing new. And we should recognize that those who oppose Christ and his people often are not content, except they would utterly obliterate the church. You get that in verse 4. The nations had said, "Come, and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance." Is that not the way many are? They would have no remembrance of the church. And often
he just goes right. Oh, okay. I'm trying to follow. Look, the question is, when it comes to Psalm 83, maybe I'll just put this question in. Clearly, Psalm 83, no matter what he says, no matter what anybody else says, it's a lament for Israel, most likely happening during the circumstances as we read about them in 2 Chronicles chapter 20. These are nations who come against the nation of Israel. This is the nation of Israel lamenting to God. And however God intervenes, if 2 Chronicles 20 is the historical context, read 2 Chronicles 20 and see how God intervenes, then is it not based on God's covenant that he has made with Israel? So then when we are going to apply this to us, we got to be very careful here, right? Is God going to intervene for us like he did for the nation of Israel? Go through all the times God intervenes for the nation of Israel. Go through all the different times. Are we going to get plagues to deliver us from some bad situation like he did for Israel? Is he going to feed us with manna? Is he going to part the Red Sea? Is he going to do all of those things? Or those things specifically for the nation of Israel based off a covenant he made with them? Now, the application we can come from that is God, if whatever covenant God, we are a part of the new covenant because we've been grafted in, but that's God doing things for us spiritually. Those national promises are still to the nation of Israel. We can't take those national promises and make them ours. So what can be applied from Psalm 83? Well, what can be applied is we find ourselves in difficult situations and we can be honest to cry out to God in a lament. That is applicable, which requires us to be honest, to be vulnerable, and to be truthful with our emotions and feelings and cry out to God. It allows us to be honest about our circumstances and not have to pretend that our circumstances aren't bad. We can acknowledge when our circumstances are bad. That's okay. That doesn't call into question our faith. Well, maybe we can take from this that we may know that his name alone is Jehovah, Lord, and that he is the most high over all the earth. Maybe that's the main lesson everyone can take from this. But we got to be careful to say, hey, as God helps Israel here, God intervenes for us and protects and no, you can't make that claim because God doesn't intervene that way on our behalf. No way, no how can you say that? He intervenes for us spiritually. We are protected spiritually. We are preserved spiritually. There's a perseverance of the saints in the sense that we are saved and we will remain saved for eternity.
People have sought to obliterate any semblance of the gospel in a land. The church then, surrounded by enemies.
And I always find it interesting that we're going to somehow compare ourselves to what's going on with Israel. Now, come on. I can't speak for what country he's in because I don't know what country he's in. But here in the United States of America, you hear Christians like, oh, our enemies are surrounding us. They want to wipe us out of existence. Oh, the church is just barely hanging on. They're going to come take our Bibles. And we're saying that on our podcast, on our sermon, being broadcasted all over the internet, as there's a church on every street corner. There are Christian radio stations, Christian television stations. There's Christian books being sold everywhere. Bibles are available everywhere. You can have church Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You can have prayer meetings. You can do Bible studies. I can turn on this microphone and broadcast all day, all night, all weekend, all 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, as long as I can keep talking. But we're being surrounded by our enemies and they want to wipe us out of existence. Yeah, the enemies are so hard on us that you're broadcasting on the internet. I mean, come on now. Israel was facing actual enemies who actually wanted to kill them. Are there people today who hate the gospel? Yes. Are there people today who hate Christianity? Yes. There's probably people out there, if given the ability, would take away our rights. But there's Christians who want to take away the rights of other people too. So we could reverse that. So I just don't know how this has turned into about the church.
Friends, when we feel that way, we shouldn't be surprised. It often has been a lot of God's people. But what we must notice secondly is the church protected by God. You see, it seems that they are left on their own. And so you have this prayer, keep not thou silence, O God, hold not thy peace and be not still, O God. Obviously, it appears that God seemed to be silent. He was holding his peace. He was still. At least that's the way it seemed. So there's Israel, surrounded by these enemies who are baying for her blood, as it were, seeking her utter destruction. And it seems as if she is left on her own. But you'll notice, she is not left on her own. And that's true of God's people as individuals, and it's true of the church. Never left on her own. He never abandons his people. And that's brought out by what we have in verse 3, how the church are described as thy hidden ones. Isn't that a lovely phrase? The hidden ones.
Does that phrase, the sheltered ones, the hidden ones, the treasured ones, depending on your translation, that's in 83:3, does that describe us? Does that describe the church? Or is that describing Israel and its covenant relationship with God? I'm posing questions. Remember, I'm trying to get you up off the couch. I want you to really dig into Psalm 83. I guess the question today we're going to be left with is, how do you apply this to us? What part is applicable? Are you good enough to be able to go, no. That is clearly for Israel, and this is the lesson we can learn from. This is what we can take from, because there's got to be a distinction here. Right? Because what I want you to do is go to 2 Chronicles 20 and see how God intervenes. If 2 Chronicles 20 is the historical context for Psalm 83, what happens in that battle in 2 Chronicles 20? And when God intervenes that way, does he intervene? Are you going to say that it's guaranteed he's going to intervene for us whenever we face our enemies? Well, what happens when a church is wiped off the face of the earth by, I don't know, a storm, or a gunman walks in and kills 20, 30 people? So why doesn't God intervene like he did in 2 Chronicles 20? See, is it describing what God did for them, but it's not prescribing how God is going to intervene for you. There is a distinction between God describing what he did for a covenant people whom he made a promise to. And that's one thing, describing that. It's far different to take that and then prescribe that that's how God will act on our behalf. Are you sure?
Those whom God has hidden, those whom God has placed in a place of safety, that's the picture. He's taken them. He's provided shelter so that they are hidden, so that they are out of harm's way. Think of Psalm 27. There the psalmist saying he's unafraid, and he is rejoicing and meditating upon God. And the thing is, he is there in the pavilion or the tent of God. For he in his pavilion shall me hide in evil days. In secret of thy tent me hide, and on a rock me raise. There's God's people, hidden with God, sheltered by God. You get the same in Psalm 91. He that doth in the secret place of the Most High reside, under the shade of him that is the Almighty shall abide. We cry out for God to protect us. And God is one who surrounds and who protects his people. And as we flee to him, as we look to him, as we pray as the psalmist did, and as we seek to remain in fellowship with him, with our thoughts focused on him, then we shall have that sense of his protection and his help even in the dark and difficult days.
See, so we will get the same protection? I am struggling with this. So while he was talking, I decided to have a conversation with artificial intelligence because I'm like, all right. So I asked, what is the significance of the phrase sheltered ones in Psalm 83:3? All right. Now, I know it's translated different ways. It says the phrase sheltered ones in Psalm 83:3 carries the significance in the context of the psalm as a whole. In this verse, the psalmist is calling out to God, referring to his people using the term sheltered ones. This term highlights the idea that God's people are under the protection and care of the Almighty. Now, this is how he went after it. This is how the pastor that we're listening to went after it. Hey, listen, if you believe in God, then you're under his protection and care. All right, well, then how do we completely understand that? Because it goes on, the phrase sheltered ones conveys a sense of being under divine shelter or refuge of God, emphasizing the security and safety that comes from being in a relationship with him. Throughout the psalm and other biblical texts, God is often described as a refuge, fortress, shelter for his people, providing them protection, comfort, and peace. Again, if God is the one doing the protecting, why do then we need guns? Why do we need to lock our doors? God is protecting us. Why? Don't worry about anything. So then how does that work? Do you need to protect yourself or do you not? Does God protect you or does God not protect you? And how come you say God protects you if something doesn't happen, but then what do you do the minute it does happen? Then God wasn't protecting you. Why did God stop protecting you? Like how do we understand this? Right? So it goes on to say, therefore, the significance of the phrase sheltered ones of Psalm 83 lies in the portrayal of God's people as under the protective wing of the Almighty, finding security and refuge in the presence amidst challenges and enemies. So, all right, Psalm 83, so AI goes with the typical way most sermons are preached, making it about us. But I wasn't done with AI. So I said, isn't the phrase referring to the nation of Israel? And then guess what AI did? Yes, you are correct. I'm telling you, I only want to talk theology to AI. That's the only thing I want to do. I don't want to talk to AI about theology to people because AI constantly tells me I am correct. All right, here we go. It says, yes, you are correct. In the context of Psalm 83:3, the phrase sheltered ones is indeed referring to the nation of Israel. I know it is so complicated to figure that out. All I have to do is after it reads sheltered ones is just read the next verse where nation and Israel is literally used in verse 4. So sheltered ones is referring to the nation of Israel. Okay. The text makes it abundantly clear. You don't even need to go to seminary to figure that out. All right, but it says, yes, you are correct. In the context of Psalm 83, the phrase sheltered ones is indeed referring to the nation of Israel. The psalm is a plea of God's protection for Israel against its enemies who are conspiring against them. The sheltered ones in this verse specifically denotes the people of Israel, highlighting their relationship with God as his chosen and protected nation. Throughout the psalmist describes the various nations and groups that are plotting against Israel, seeking to destroy or overthrow Israel. In response to this threat, the psalmist turns to God, acknowledging him as the ultimate protector and the protector of Israel. By addressing the Israelites as sheltered ones, the psalmist emphasizes their unique status as God's chosen people under his divine care and relationship. Therefore, the phrase sheltered ones in Psalm 83 specifically refers to the nation of Israel, underscoring their special relationship with God and the assurance of his protection in the face of adversity. It is about their covenant relationship with God. God intervenes on the behalf of Israel, protects and provides in a way he doesn't for anyone else. That should allow you then to make more sense of the text. Let's listen to a little bit more of the sermon and then we'll wrap this up.
Think of Proverbs 18 verse 10. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run into it and are safe. God's name.
Yeah, we run to God's name and we are safe. Safe from what? I'm safe from the wrath of God. I'm safe from hell. I'm safe from condemnation because in Christ I am safe. In his name, I come to him for righteousness. Are you going to say I'm safe from every negative thing that can happen in life? What, was I safe when I was being abused as a child? Oh, no, I wasn't. Was I safe from developing neurological issues and having seizures that, could possibly kill me? Nope. Wasn't protected from that. I mean, I could go through lots of horrible stories. There's a famous pastor right now who's in all kinds of trouble. You can read about in the Christian Post, who supposedly not only had inappropriate relations, but possibly was having relations with a girl as young as the age of 12. Was she protected? Yeah, we don't like those difficult questions. I think because sometimes we make these assumptions that God has promised us something that I don't think reality demonstrates. This is about it. God did protect them. He preserved them because he preserved the nation because from Israel would come the Messiah. In the Messiah, I am protected from an eternity separated from God. I am saved from my sin. Therefore, nothing can come against me, spiritually speaking, in the sense of taking away my salvation. In that covenant made with me and salvation, is there a guarantee of protection from pain, suffering, and death in this life? Absolutely not. There is no guarantee of protection from anything like that.
In God's character, who he is and what he is like, he is our security. And as we run to him, we're safe. In the old days, what did people do? If the enemy was seen on the horizon. They fled into the towns and they closed the doors. If there was a castle, he went up to the castle, Edinburgh Castle, Stirling Castle. Why are they there? To be a refuge, to be a strong tower, their safety, their security. God, the security of his people. We enter into our chambers, Isaiah 26:20. We hide ourselves there until the indignation be overpast. Looking down into a bomb shelter. There may be trouble, but there's security in God. The church protected by God. You think of how the likes of
And I kept referring to that as a British accent. That's actually Scottish. As soon as he said something about the castle, wherever it was located, I was like, I'm ridiculous. I referred to that as a British accent. I'm sorry. So, yeah. I don't know why I referred to it as British accent. It's clearly a Scottish accent. Why did I do that? Because I'm from Texas. That's why, okay? And the only accent that we recognize as legitimate is a Texas one, okay? So I apologize for that. I got that completely wrong, okay? All right? I don't know why I said it was British. It was Scottish, okay? So I apologize for that. Someone, I probably already got an email. Let me look at my email inbox. I probably already have an email. Someone going, you don't even know the difference between a Scottish and British accent. What is wrong with you? All right? You're probably right. Hang on. Let me look at my email. Let's see if I can apologize to people already. Here we go. Wait. Oh, I've gotten. Oh, no. Okay. See, I do have an email. Oh boy. Hang on. It came on during this. Oh, no. Okay. Election of the non-elect. This is, someone says, hope you are well. If you get a chance, this sermon might be worth reviewing. All right. So thank you, Paul. All right. So, good. Paul was not telling me that I confused a Scottish accent with a British accent. The bottom line is, what I am not confusing is the identity of who this is about. It's about Israel. So this challenges us here. And I'm just going to stop right there. You can go listen to the rest of that sermon, The Church's Cry for Help, and you can look that up. All right. Now, and it comes from Bethel Free Church, located in southwest Scotland. Not England. Okay, all right. Okay, so not in London, all right? Okay, my understanding of Europe and the UK and England and Scotland and okay, right? Yeah, I'll get it all confused. All right, now I feel foolish. All right, but I apologize for that. The whole point about the accent was whether it's Scottish, British, wherever it is, it sounds so we can be greatly influenced by an accent. But in this case, I'm not being influenced by the accent because I just have a strong difficulty here, and my difficulty here is that he's taking whatever promises he believes is being articulated here about protection and preservation and help that clearly is for the nation of Israel. He's applying that to us. And I constantly challenge this concept that you can't take some of these promises of protection and preservation and make them about us because it raises so many questions. And if we are saying that we have a certain promise that's not for us, you're going to leave people discouraged, disillusioned, disappointed, and possibly deconstructing because they're not going to understand. So there we have it. I went 60 minutes to determine that I was confusing an accent from Scotland, okay, with a British accent. I apologize. All right. In fact, I'm going to look something up here. Hang on. I'm going to look something up here. Hang on. I'm looking something up. Hang on. Stay with me. Hey, oh, I can't. Hang on. I'm almost there. Hang on. Just stay with me. Hang on, almost. Okay, I guess the correct way to say this, hang on. It says, well, there's a lot of things here about which English accent has the most similarity with Scottish. And there's certain dialects that I guess are similar. There are many accents within Britain, including all the Scottish ones. There is no one British accent. So, there we go. I guess, so there is not really a British accent, I guess, according to this. That's interesting. All right, so I would have to get into a whole discussion about accents and dialects and all of that. So what's the correct way? I should have just said this, the Scottish accent is very different to our ears. So I don't know. I'm going to get people from Europe who contact me and from other countries. I got to be very careful how I say it. From other countries, they say, "What are you doing?" I'm going to say, "I'm an American. Don't you know about us Americans? That we don't think anything else exists other than America?" Okay, right there. There we go. That's pretty funny. All right. So a little bit of humor at my expense. All right. Thank you for listening. But the seriousness of Psalm 83 is we got to be careful how we do that. I don't think that's the church. I think that's Israel. I think any promised protection of Israel is a promised protection for a covenant nation who God made very specific promises to. And I don't think I can take those promises and apply them to me. And look at 2 Chronicles 20 to find out exactly how God, if Psalm 83, if the historical setting of Psalm 83 is 2 Chronicles 20, what did God do in 2 Chronicles 20? And can I take that and say he's going to do that for us? All right, thanks for listening. You can email me, newsif@yahoo.com. That's newsif@yahoo.com. This is the podcast that doesn't know the difference between what I refer to as a British accent and a Scottish accent. But according to the first thing I bring up on the internet, there are many different accents within Britain, including all the Scottish ones. There is no one British accent. So if there is no one British accent, can I refer to them as all British accents? So then therefore, was I actually correct? Was I more correct than I knew? Or no? Am I just looking for something on the internet to prove that I was right? If I look long enough, I'll find something to say, hey, actually, I was correct. Right? But yeah, now I'm reaching. Thanks for listening. Everyone have a great day. God bless.